Hello, everyone. Welcome to CO Open Field Scrapper Training. That's kind of going to be my focus for this whole thing. Uh, there are a couple of differences between playing Scrapper in open field versus in GVGs, so I wanted to make sure to preface that ahead of time. But even now, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I will start off by talking about what we're going to talk about, at least in this first section. I wanted to break it down into three major sections so that people could feel like they have like a progression process as they start to play Scrapper, starting with like the beginning, like your first times playing Scrapper and everything that's happening, the intermediate sections, and then the advanced sections. And I'll go through the contents of each once I get to those sections. But for starters, in the beginning section, I'll talk about what is Scrapper as like a whole, like ANET's standard definition. What is Scrapper used for, like what its role and job is in a Zerg in World v World. I'll go through all of the armor, like runes, sigils, weapons, trinkets, all that good stuff. Then I'll go over utility skills, weapon skills, and tool belt skills. And I think there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, the traits, just so that you understand why you're running the traits that you're running to get a better understanding of the class as a whole. So, to start off, Scrapper, gonna make this real quick. Scrapper is an elite spec of Engineer, based in Heart of Thorns, gives you access to a hammer, as well as wells, or as going to be commonly referred to as gyros. In this build I'm going to show, we utilize three of them, but I'll go through each of them in detail later on. So, what is the job of a Scrapper inside a World v World Zerg? And I know this is going to shock some people, but it is actually funny enough to keep your team alive, the whole squad alive. Something that I like to preface, especially when I'm trying to teach people Scrapper, especially for the first time, is that the whole squad is your responsibility. It's not just your party. Anyone can get immobilized, anyone can have chilled cripple on their bar, so it is your job to do what you can to save them. So, what tools in your kit do you have, pun only slightly intended, what tools in your kit are designed to help you with all this, right? So your four major tools are going to be Cleanse, which a lot of people already know, Healing, Super Speed, and Stealth. So does anyone have questions on what Scrapper is, what your role is, before I move on to like what skills you're actually going to be utilizing when playing Scrapper as a whole? I will take silence as no questions. So then I will move over to, actually, I'll move over to armor, weapons, and like trinkets. So for just about all of your pieces, I think for absolutely all of your pieces, don't worry about any of my inventory stuff. It's an absolute mess, I know. Um, but you should be running full minstrels with monk runes, and like that's for all of your trinkets, rings, back piece, neck piece. Everything is minstrels, and I like to talk about two real weapon sets that you could utilize for World v World, and that is going to be Pistol Shield and Hammer. Um, so I'll go into more detail about weapon skills themselves once I talk about weapon skills, but just know for now that Pistol Shield is going to be your more defensive weapon set, and Hammer is going to be your more aggressive weapon set. The sigils that you're going to want on them are there's a pretty varied array of options you could run. I think for CO though, going to be running energy sigil as well as transference, which is more dodges, more healing. Very, very good. Does anyone have questions about the armor? Anyone have any questions about alternatives they've heard that they want any answers on?
Oh, what about durability runes?
Um, I think durability runes are a very selfish rune for the most part. Uh, I would recommend Monk pretty highly over durability runes because you gain the extra vitality, but you're losing 125 healing power as well as that very nice 10% healing effectiveness on allies when you get um, boons applied to you. Yeah. So you gain 1% for 3 seconds for every boon granted to an ally, up to 10%, as well as a flat 10%. I think it says here at the end as well. Yeah. So that is 20% extra healing for allies, which, as a scrapper, uh, and I probably should have added this into a scrapper's like role, responsibility, job as well. We are kind of the force that helps people when they've made mistakes, whether with positioning or forgetting to dodge or anything of that sort. So when needing to recover from like any bad situation, having the extra healing is always going to be super valuable. Um, you do gain some boons from durability, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be as good as the extra healing power you get from monk. Hope that answered your question.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Does anyone have any other questions? I will take silence as a no. So now I'll move on to weapon skills first, since I kind of started to touch on it a little bit ago. I know CO recommends pistol shield, and that's going to also be correlated with the associated trait lines that we have here. So I guess I'll talk about that one first. You really don't want to be utilizing your pistol skills. Like, you can shoot at people if there is absolutely nothing to do and absolutely no one needs anything. Um, but I won't really talk about those too much. Uh, Shield skills are where you're going to be spending a lot of your time, at least in your weapon itself. Your shield 5, which is the first one I'll talk about, is a 2.5 second block, which is phenomenal for getting you through rough or hairy situations. It also causes anyone who is around you to be stunned for 1.25 seconds if they hit you while you have your shield ticking. So it is very good to, if there's anyone trying to hit you or attack you and you're blocking, like, you'll be able to get out of those situations pretty easily, which is very, very nice. And your shield 4 starts off as a projectile block, or reflect actually, um, on the first press, and when you press it a second time, it'll be a blast. So you could blast something like your smoke fields, you could blast water fields, whatever you think needs blasting at the time. The other alternative is hammer. Um, Hammer, your major skills you're going to be looking to use is Thunderclap, which is a 1200 range stun. I didn't want to show them getting hit, so I had to go around. But yeah, it is a 1.25 second, 1.25 or 3/4 second. Yeah, 1.25.
You can hit me. It's me.
Oh, okay, all
I
right.
don't mind. This is me.
I see. Um, so it is a 1200 range, 1.25 second stun, which is really, really good offensively. This is why I say that this is going to be the more aggressive weapon set. So when you hear things like well calls being used, you could use Thunderclap inside of the well calls to stun anyone who's trying to like dodge outside of it. Um, the other ability that you're going to want to look for when using Hammer is your Shock Shield. It is an 18-second cooldown block that lasts for 2 seconds. Well, it's 1.75 seconds, but whatever. Basically a 2 second block, which is very nice, similar to um, your pistol shield set with Shield 5, except Shield 5 has a slightly longer cooldown, but a longer block duration. So both are good. I normally say that running hammer or running pistol shield comes down to preference and what you prefer playing. I guess also I'll touch on Electro Whirl. It is a whirl finisher. You can use it to like whirl on water or light fields to get the cleansing bolts or the healing bolts. Not normally a high priority because you're going to be looking to do other things with your med kit, which I guess will be the next kit that I talk about since it is what you should be spending the majority of your time in. Your med kit 1 is just a basically the equivalent of what you think of as like an auto attack, but for med kit. Sadly, you can't just click it once and it'll spam infinitely. You have to keep pressing it, which is carpal tunnel inducing, but that's okay. really good if you have any downtime whatsoever and you feel like you want to be, you don't necessarily have anything major to be doing. Medkit 1 is always a good filler ability, something to be using to like heal ambient cleave. While talking about healing skills, I guess I'll move over to Medkit 2, which is, I'd say, a shotgun of healing. I don't know if anyone saw on my screen there that there are these little bandages that came out when it blasts in a wide radius. I'll do it again just to show it. So you get, I think it's either 5 or 7 packets. Yeah, 5 bandages. So each bandage heals for quite a bit, especially with monk runes. You can heal over 2k per actual package itself. And I've seen it go much, much higher than that as well. So the main idea behind it is the more bandages you hit on an individual person, there's no one who's actually low health to show this on, but like, let's say Myth was low HP, I could just come up and hit him with all 5 blasts of that, and that'll heal him for pretty high, over 10k HP if needed. So very, very good. When I show my footage later, you'll see. Oh, you don't need to actually hit him, but yeah, you'll see like very good for single target support. Also gives regen uptime, which is very, very valuable. Next, I'll go over to the Medkit 4 since it's another heal. This is your AoE heal. This is when you see 5 people around you that are low HP. This is at least my first thought of what I think to use is Vital Burst. 20-second cooldown, can heal over 4k with all of your healing modifiers and everything. Very, very nice. Keeps people alive, at least to get from point A to point B. Next, I'll move on to the main cleansing ability that's within Medkit itself, which is Cleanse Field. Cleanse Field removes 1 condition per pulse for 4 pulses, and the actual water field itself stays on the ground for 3 seconds. So in the end, it'll cleanse, if you were to get maximum efficiency, it'll cleanse for about 20 condies. Well, not about if it's optimal, but yeah, it'll be 20 condies cleansed if you get all ticks on it. And it also puts down a water field. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll drop Cleanse Field and then throw Infusion Bomb, which is the next ability I'll talk about, which gives you an area healing finisher, well, water finisher, which heals, and drops Infusion Bomb, which is something that should be used very, very often because it is very, very nice. Not only is it a blast finisher, but it also gives swiftness, vigor, and regen, as you can see on the screen. And I don't know if everyone can see that, but like the 17 seconds of regen will heal in the end for like 5,000 health, which is a crazy amount. And it's something I will talk about quite a bit when looking at the traits, as well as how much regen scrappers give and how valuable that really is. Alright, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the weapon skills I talked about and Medkit as a whole, as a kit?
Well, like my question is about Vital Burst.
Yep.
Now, would you use that when you're getting ready to engage in like a big group? Because usually in our guild we only run about 10 to 15, so a lot of times we're outnumbered. Like, would I use that on the initial attack so that I can basically take away some of that damage that's being all bursted on us by the extra people?
I would say I like to use Vital Burst more when I see people are like low HP. So rather than like a preemptive thing, I think of it more as like a reactionary thing, right? So I'll use Moth as an example here, right? If everyone were to attack Moth, which I hope no one would, but if anyone were to attack Moth right now, I could utilize like Vital Burst on him once his HP starts to go down. Or even better usage, since it hits up to 5 targets, if all of the people around me here were getting to low HP, that's when I would think to use Vital Burst. Because the one thing about Vital Burst is it is just a heal. It is an AoE heal, and it heals for quite a bit, but I wouldn't necessarily want to use Vital Burst in the case of like, if people had like I just lost like 600 health. If I use Vital Burst now, I'm not going to get the full value out of it. So I would look to save it more as like a reactionary thing. So people's health start to get low, so I would drop Vital Burst, or I would use Vital Burst to like heal them once it comes up, because the heal does come out immediately. So it's not like if you're running and you press Vital Burst here, it's gonna occur right where you use it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone have any other
So,
questions?
with infusion bomb,
Hmm.
if you have it's still important to use it basically off cooldown, I think, but if you had to choose between dropping it on a cleansing field or your purge gyro, what would you choose to do? Or would it
Yeah,
just depend
so
on the situation?
I think it does depend on the situation pretty heavily. But one thing that I like to think about, especially with Infusion Bomb, and the reason why I talk about pairing it with Cleansing Field a lot, is I think it's very good to utilize when we're regrouping. So in the times when we've stopped moving and we're trying to regroup ourselves to move on to the next push, then I would think to drop Cleanse Field into Infusion Bomb, because I can also guarantee that I'm getting my whole party or whoever's very close and grouped up together with me are going to get the effects of the infusion bomb, instead of trying to throw it ahead to where it's on a 14-second cooldown, so I can't show you. But if we were looking to push and I'm trying to aim infusion bomb forward to wherever we're looking to go, as well as pushing, yeah, because it has that 1 second um that 1 second fuse time, it's I like to just throw it specifically with cleanse field. I mean, I also value the healing field over the extra Condi cleanse on Purge Gyro myself. I think the 1,000 healing will keep people alive in a better situation than an extra 5 cleanses will.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? I will take that as a no, and I'll move on to our 3 gyros. I was gonna say 4 gyros. We don't have that. We have 3. Um, I'll start off with the first one, which is Purge Gyro, which is your main. Uh, I'll say your big mobile cleanse in this kit. So it is a gyro that will move with you, as you can see on the screen, creates a light field on you. Once it concludes, it'll give you a second and a half of super speed, but that's because of the traits that we're going to be running, and I'll talk about that later. Um, but the main reason we use it is because it'll clear 1 Condi on 5 allies for 5 pulses, which will end up being 25 Condis cleared total for your party or the people that are around you while you're moving. So I'll talk about optimal. Also, if people are gonna ask this later on, I will talk about what I believe is best usage for abilities like Cleanse Field, Purge Gyro, and Fumigate, which we'll get into later in Elixir Gun if people have questions about that later, or if they were thinking about asking questions about that. But yeah, so Purge Gyro, basic things to know: mobile, cleanse, moves with you, cleanses 25 Condis, gives you super speed at the end. It is a light field. The next gyro is going to be Bulwark Gyro. This allows you to soak a percentage of your allies' damage that's around you, up to 5 allies' damage. Gives you a little bit of personal barrier on pulse and an initial burst of barrier. Um, it will also give you super speed at the end, especially people who are newer to Scrapper. I normally say to never really press this button. This button can get you killed very easily. So, say Moth was standing in Dragon Hunter traps, and I had my Bulwark Gyro ticking, and he was dying to Dragon Hunter traps, I'd also be dying to Dragon Hunter traps at a pretty quick rate as well. Uh, so you just need to be very careful when utilizing it. The final gyro I'll talk about is Sneak Gyro. This is a smoke field, a mobile smoke field, uh, that will pulse a second and a half of stealth every second for 6 pulses. But for 5 seconds, which will end up giving you roughly 7 seconds of stealth. A lot of times, this is what Rawl will be calling when he asks for stealth or smokes or sneak. If you're running pistol shield, this is also a good ability to pair with your shield 4 to blast to get an extra 3 seconds on the smoke field. And as all of the gyros do, it gives you an extra second and a half of super speed at the very end of it. Does anyone have any questions about the gyros?
Okay, can you repeat that last part? It said when asked when he's calling for smoke or stealth or the other one?
Yes. So it'll be like smoke, stealth, sneak. Sneak is
Sneak.
another one that's
Okay.
pretty common. I'm
And
saying
you
like what any commander says, like that. Those are like three of the most common terminologies I guess you'll hear.
and you normally pair that with
A lot of times I'll pair that with something like my shield 4. If you press it twice, it's a blast finisher. So you saw that little area stealth that popped up on my screen. It will blast the smoke field and give an extra 3 seconds of stealth on top of the stealth that the sneak gyro itself already gives.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Does anyone have any other questions? And by the way, the shield 4 is just a blast. It can be used on any of the fields that we talk about. Ideally not bulwark because it's a lightning field, and I actually don't know what that combos into. Swiftness, which is I guess fine, but I would much rather value a water field blast to get extra healing on the group, or a smoke field blast to get extra stealth for the group. So does anyone have any other questions on gyros? I'll take
So
silence as a no.
Veloka just
Cool.
mentioned that some commanders will say gyro when they want you to sneak, so that's another word. And Pim says
True.
you can block the attacks you absorb from bulwark with a shield or hammer blocks. So if you find that you have to use that,
So I do want to disprove that. That is not true. If you have bulwark ticking and you have the shield 5, anyone who takes damage from inside of your bulwark itself, you will still take that damage. You won't take the residual damage if you're very close to that person and you're getting hit by, say, Dragon Hunter traps. You'll block the Dragon Hunter trap damage on yourself, but you will still take the damage that your allies are taking around you. I do want to make sure to throw that out there, because it killed me multiple times, especially when I was first starting out. So with that, I will move over to Elixir Gun, which is our last utility, but also our final kit. The two main things you want to really look at when you're inside of this kit are Super Elixir, which is a light field that you shoot in a direction. When it lands, it gives you a huge burst of healing, as well as ticks healing over a duration that it sits there. And I think it sits for, 11 or 10 seconds with 11 pulses, which ends up being a lot of healing, as well as being a light field, but I mainly like to talk about it for the healing aspect. And the final, and arguably the most important healing or cleansing skill that scrappers have, is Fumigate. Fumigate is a directional 5 Condi clear on 5 targets. I think the directional aspect is one of the most important parts of that. Also, the fact that it's an instant Condi clear, so the way it works is once you have a target, you hit that person with a Fumigate, it will instantly clear the 5 Condis off of them. But keep in mind, it does have a 5 target cap, so after it's like hit 5 targets, it's not going to hit other people. So it's like a maximum of 25 Condis cleansed. But I will say, and I'll talk about this more in the intermediate section that I'm going to be moving to in a little bit, that one of the most important parts of it is the fact that it is directional and it is super long range. Like 600 range, you may not think is a lot, but just to use one of these people here as an example.
will it cleanse your
For the
party
cooldown
first before others if they are in the aim?
It will. It will actually cleanse your party first if they're in the game. Assuming that they have any condis whatsoever, it will prioritize them. This is why a lot of times when you start like learning to like position better as a scrapper and you're trying to like cleanse a specific person, you might want to like move a little bit away from your group. But just to like show you the range, like from where I'm standing to this group over here, like that is 600 range, which is a surprisingly large distance. It is the majority of a Winds of Disenchantment. It is a lot longer than people might think. You don't need to stand directly next to the person if you want to hit them with a fumigate. Same thing with medkit. Like, medkit is also 600 range, which, to be honest, is kind of disgusting that the range is so long. So you could heal someone who's sitting in a Winds of Disenchantment pretty far away from you with something like your medkit one. So, before I move over to tool belt skills, does anyone have questions about Elixir Gun? Alright, cool. Something I will mention real quick as well is that there is a blast technically on your 4, which you can utilize, but I don't recommend it, especially if you're starting off, because as I'm going to show you, it'll launch you backwards pretty far, unless you cancel it, which I think Rawl showed an example of on the side, where you cancel the animation. But a lot of times in the time it takes you to cancel the animation, you are leaving yourself at least a little bit behind, as you can see that little animation put him back, even if it is just a little bit, and then, or even just straight up and down if you get the animation perfectly, it'll still leave you standing there for that extra moment or two. So you need to be very careful when utilizing it. With that, since I didn't hear any questions a second ago, I'll move on to tool belt skills. I'll say the first tool belt skill I'll talk about is Regenerating Mist. So this is the tool belt skill associated to Elixir Gun. This is your only stun break in the entirety of your kit. I would use it as such. It's a 35-second cooldown, which is pretty long, so if you get CC'd and you're in danger, don't be afraid to use this. But I also wouldn't recommend using this for the regen. Use this for the stun break so you can keep yourself alive. If you're going to use any one ability in your entire kit selfishly, I'd say that's the one to use. The other one I would also say is your static shield or your hammer block. But yeah, to move on to your super speed abilities, your Bandage Self is your biggest healing in the kit, your biggest self-heal in the kit. It gives you 10 seconds of self super speed and gives all allies around you 3 seconds of super speed. I'll talk about usage of these abilities later on again. Chemical Field, to be honest, it's just really a poison field. You could put it on down states if you have nothing else to really do, but pretty low priority in terms of like what you should be using.
Why do we
Defense
want to
Field.
put it on downstates?
Oh, that is a very good question. So poison, as you can see here, has a 33% healing effectiveness reduction. So if Guardian, like Firebrand Signets or Tempest Glyphs, go off onto enemy downstates, or what would be their ally downstates, if there's poison on those downstates, if their health is low enough, the Signet can not fully res them, so they'll be brought up to like 97, 96, even 90% health in downstate, but they won't actually go up from downstate. Good call there, Will.
So you can drop it in the pile as you're running through if there's downs and you can't stop.
Oh, yeah. Because I think it is technically instant cast as an ability, so like even, well, Tess is now. Nah. Like, you can't do it exactly while you're dodging, but it is a very quick cast time. It's so negligible they don't even put it here. But you do need to actually be moving.
And it stacks too.
Yeah, the poison. Yeah. To move on to what I'd say is a very important skill that you have, Defense Field. I know CO likes to use Defense Field as what would be your first stab. It is 10 seconds, 10.25 seconds of stability, and it gives you 3 stacks of stability, as well as being a projectile block. So this is what you're going to be using right before you push into the enemy group to make sure that your party members have stab.
And I would just add on there that, in my opinion, that you could obviously offer your insight there, Imperial, that I think it's better to get it out a smidge too soon than a smidge too late. Just so that people aren't running into lines, getting CC'd, that kind of stuff on the initial engage. Your party will appreciate you if you get it out maybe like a second too early than a second too late. It is 10.75 seconds, almost 11 seconds. And if we're committing to a push, we will get value out of it. So don't know if you have any input on
Most
that.
certainly. Yeah, I was. You answered the question for me, which was great. Yeah, since it is a 10.25 second like boon uptime, like you have a full 10 seconds before you're actually gonna collide with the enemy group. It is better to, if you imagine the hit is gonna happen, it is better to use it and get the stab on people than to not use it, get CC'd, and then try to press it afterwards, like Rawl was saying. And finally, the last skill I'll talk about is Function Gyro. This is another ability that comes from being a scrapper. It is a 600 range gyro that you can drop on people. The main reason we think about this is to super speed people who may be far away from stack. Like I showed over there, if Moth were the tag right now, and these people were far away, I might give those people super speed with Function Gyro to get them back to Moth. The other two uses of Function Gyro are to res downstates, so it will heal for a small amount as if someone were hand resing the person. So if you have allies that are in downstate, it will act as another reser for those downstates. The problem is it does have a health bar, so it can be killed and will be killed very quickly. So if you drop it on ally downstates, and the enemy is cleaving on them, there's a high probability that the function gyro will die very quickly. But even in those cases, I do say sometimes it's good to put on downstates anyway, just to give a little bit of extra downstate healing, as well as super speed if somebody's going to be able to get the signets on the player or players. And I guess the final thing it does is it can stomp downstates, like any normal person would, but again, it has a health bar, and you really shouldn't use it that way, because there's a low probability it's actually going to stomp the person, and you're losing the second and a half of super speed you could be giving to other people, or throwing it on ally downstates. So, I know that was a lot of information all at once. Does anyone have any questions about, it could be about anything that I've said so far, but I guess more specifically the tool belt skills I just went over. Again, I'll take silence as a no. So just to really quickly go through all of the traits. I guess, yeah, I'll go through all of the traits that you can actually choose just to speed this up so that we don't run out of time. The first trait, the first line in Inventions, Overshield, gives you a 20% reduction on all of your shield skills. So if you're running Pistol Shield, you'd be running this trait. If you're running Hammer, honestly, you could run either of the other two traits. But you do get a 20% protection increase. So like protection would normally heals or stop incoming damage up to 33% incoming damage, but you gain a little bit more because you have this trait itself, which is very, very nice. But if that's the only reason why you're running the trait, I think these other two traits are better. Like auto defense bomb dispenser just puts a smoke field, or well, a smoke field at your feet whenever you get disabled. So if you get CC'd, it puts a smoke field down there. This was another reason why I was talking about the blast on shield 4. If you end up running this trait whenever you get CC'd, when you get up from being CC'd, if you're not already dodging, which you probably should be, but you can also try and blast with magnetic shield to try to get stealth on the people around you. Again, that's a little more advanced. You don't necessarily need to think about that. If you're running Pistol Shield, you should be running this first trait up here. The next trait we look at is Soothing Detonation, which heals all nearby allies whenever you use a tool belt skill. So if I run through all of these tool belt skills all at once, I'll gain a little over 3,000 healing for all of for all allies around me, up to 5 people. So it's an extra 3,000 healing for 5 allies, which is very, very nice. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about is MDF, Medical Dispersion Field, which takes 10% of all healing that you apply to yourself and send it out to other people around you. So this does not only include your F1 Bandage Self, which can heal you for a large amount. or your Vital Burst, both of those do count towards it. But even things like your Regeneration, your Soothing Detonation, your Super Elixir, all of these things move towards Medical Dispersion Field. After that 10% of your healing for yourself has built up for up to 3 seconds, it will release, and it does this every 3 seconds. So that's the Invention Trait line. Next, we'll move on to the Alchemy Trait line. I'll just start from the beginning. So health insurance just increases the amount of healing that you give when you're in Medkit, which is insanely good, as well as just a flat 10% healing increase. Insanely good trait. Then you also have Comeback Cure, which gives regeneration every time you remove a Condi from an ally. So it might not look like a lot when you see that it's only 2.5 seconds of regeneration, but when you're pretty consistently healing a large number of people, like all the time, like this regeneration adds up very, very quickly. And finally, Purity of Purpose. I know there's a lot of things here, but on a 3-second cooldown, whenever you cleanse a Condi from an ally, it gets converted into a boon instead. Sadly, you can't pick the boon that you want. Wish we could. But it is on a 3-second cooldown. Whenever you cleanse a Condi from an ally, it will convert one of those Condis into a boon. Insanely good trait. It used to be on no ICD, so every boon or every Condi was converted into a boon. I miss those days. That was really good. Anyway, to move on to Scrapper. Gyroscopic acceleration is the thing that allows our wells, which is our gyros, to give a 1.5 seconds of super speed at the end of their cast. So that's just more super speed for the group, which is very, very valuable. Damage dampener, to be honest, is kind of just the best thing we have in the line. So basically what it does is, of the 100% of the damage you would normally take, you take 80% of it immediately, and then after 2 seconds, you take that last 20%. So it could potentially allow you to stay alive for a little while longer. Maybe that lets you get your heal off. Maybe you can block. So it's just another way to help you survive a little bit more. But to be honest, there's not very many good options in this trait line. In the other options here in those traits. And then finally, one of the best traits in this whole line is Kinetic Accelerator. Gives you a percentage of your concentration based on your power, which, to be honest, doesn't really matter for us because we don't have any power with minstrels. But the more important thing is it gives quickness whenever you grant super speed. And as we've seen before, we have a lot of tools that grant super speed. We have Purge Gyro, we have Bulwark, we have our F1, we have our Function Gyro, and we have Sneak Gyro. Again, we don't necessarily think about the quickness when we utilize this. This is more for like stealth. Like you don't want to just use this just for the super speed. Just want to clarify that. But you don't want to use any of these skills except for Bulwark. You don't want to use these two skills. I'll correct myself a lot. You don't want to use these two skills just for the super speed. Function Gyro, most of the time you want to be using for the super speed, which will give quickness. And Bandage Self, which I'll talk about later. Especially when you get more advanced, you feel more comfortable. You're not going to necessarily need the heal as often if you position yourself right. So it's more going to be for the super speed as well. Does anyone have any questions about the trait line before I move on?
Before we go to questions, I think Beer is looking to maybe scram, get some fights in here, so we might have to move to the side.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Kelly.
I see. I didn't see anything in the scheduling channel, so I thought it was fine. But okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. So next I'll move on to the intermediate section, which is where I'll really talk about when you should be utilizing your cleanses and when I think are very valuable times to utilize cleanses. And also about what I will call optimal scrapper positioning. So, where do you want to be standing while playing Scrapper? So, I'll start off with the cleanse. By the way, this is more of an intermediate topic, so you're gonna think about these things more once you actually understand what like all the buttons that I talked about like do. So, understanding that you're Condi cleansing with Purge Gyro, understanding that you get Condi cleanse on Cleanse Field, that you get cleanse from like Fumigate. What are your healing abilities? How should you be using them? Like once you feel comfortable with like knowing what each of the skills do, then you could start moving on to like why and when are you using them, right? So I'll start off with Cleanse Field because I think that's one of the more straightforward ones. Uh, it is a static field, so it is not something that moves with you. As you can see, I'm moving and it's still over by Moth. Um, so a lot of times this is a type of Condi cleanse that you're going to want to utilize while the group has stopped moving. So when the group is regrouping in a certain area and you want to get rid of those ambient Condis. So ambient Condis, for example, are things like bleed, poison, burn, torment, things like that you want to get off of your group's bar because obviously we don't want to have Condis on our bar, but it's not super high priority like Immobilize. Immobilize is arguably one of the scariest boons or Condis in the game, and we want to get that off of our allies as quickly as physically possible. So with that, I'll actually move into Fumigate, which I think is arguably your most important cleanse. I know it is extremely important, and I hear a lot of people say that you should use it off cooldown just to use it off cooldown. Um, Once you start getting to a more intermediate level where you can start understanding why you're utilizing these skills, Fumigate is a burst heal. So when you see people who have stopped moving,
You mean burst
so
cleanse?
yeah, burst cleanse. Sorry, did I say ambient cleanse?
You said burst heal.
Burst heal. Excuse me. Yes, it is a burst cleanse. Excuse me. Um, but yes, so it is a burst cleanse. So if you see somebody who has stopped moving, uh, you're going to want to fumigate for them to make sure that you could remove the immobilize and other excess cover condis that are on them. Or if you see people that are trapped inside of a Winds of Disenchantment, that is also a very, very, very good time to utilize Fumigate. Helps people get out of there as quickly as you can. Even if they are only something like Chill, they are still taking a longer time to get out of the Winds of Disenchantment. So it's good to utilize it just so that more boons on people's bar is better. So yeah. Then finally we have Purge Gyro. Purge Gyro's main usage is going to come when you're looking to cleanse ambient condis, again, similar to Cleanse Field, but you have to be moving, right? So your tag is moving, Rawl is moving around this Winds of Disenchantment that Callie just put down. I'm going to pop Purge Gyro so that, like, while we're moving, I'm clearing those condis. The other way I like to describe Purge Gyro as well is it is a skill to utilize when you feel like you can't support people as easily. So if a winds were to go down or a push is going to happen and you feel like you need to roll because, well, the push is coming and you don't want to die, you can utilize it while you're dodging. So it'll clear condis on people even while you're dodging to get yourself into a better position. So you could almost be, funny enough, as it'll sound, you could almost be supporting people while you're not able to support. Um, so like if I were to think about it, if I needed to like dodge out of a situation, I'd purge gyro and then I would turn around to like look to fumigate people and keep people inside of the purge gyro as well. And then super elixir, I would say the two ways that I like to use super elixir is when I see that there are a bunch of people who need healing and I happen to be in elixir gun. Super elixir isn't necessarily something I think about using. Like if I'm in medkit and I'm healing people, I don't necessarily think, oh, I need to swap to elixir gun to drop a super elixir on people. It's kind of more one of those things I think about it as, well, I'm in Elixir Gun to either see what my cooldown on Fumigate is or to fumigate people, and then I'll look to utilize Super Elixir. Oh, actually, a little side note that I can give is Super Elixir is considered a projectile, so if you throw it inside of a Winds of Disenchantment or like an enemy reflect, it will be eaten by the reflect or the block or whatever, and it won't actually land where you think it will. You can like skirt around the bubble and then the edge of the healing could like still be inside of the bubble or inside of the reflect, but if it directly hits the reflect or projectile block, it will go away. The other reason I like using and as you can see right there, it got eaten by the defense field of Rhea there. But the other time I like using it as well as like when I fumigate for people and I see that people need healing and I happen to be in E-gun is also if I'm looking to fumigate and I go into this and I see that we're looking to make a push. So if Moth and I were looking to make a push forward, then I'll look to like drop a super elixir somewhere forward so that once we get here, or if people are ahead of us, then they'll also receive the healing and we'll walk into a field that is healing us when we get there. I think both are valid uses. It is something that you want to use like often. I find that if I only think about using it for burst heal when I'm in here, a lot of times I'll hold on to it. So it is good to just throw out there when you can. I'll talk about your super speeds now. So your F1, and again, this is the intermediate section, so you understand what all your abilities do. You feel confident in your knowledge of that. Using your F1 to push forward. So if Rawl is calling for a push forward, a lot of times he'll count it down as well. As that countdown is happening, assuming that no one needs immediate support, I'd press my F1 so that people get super speed on that push forward. And the same thing can be done with your function gyro. If your F1 happens to be on cooldown and Rawl is pushing forward, you can drop the function gyro on your feet so that yourself and at least 2 other party members, because it is only 3 targets, will be able to move at proper speeds towards Rawl. I will say, I guess, your main use of function gyro, though, is going to be when, like, you're pushing with Rawl and say Moth is still standing back there. Like, I would look to function gyro him if he isn't, like, a mope or loaded with condies or needing, like, any immediate healing. And even if he did, it is an instant cast ability. So if I'm all the way over here, I can function gyro while I'm looking to heal for Moth. So, before I move on to ideal positioning, which for the intermediate section I think is actually going to be really short, really easy. Does anyone have any questions about ideal skill usage for Bandage Self, Purge Gyro, Cleanse Field, Fumigate, and Function Gyro? If I didn't already say Function Gyro. Bandage Self. I'll take silence as enough. And
I think there's a question. What are our superstar scrappers doing that our party 9 scrappers are not doing with the 30% gap or more in cleanses?
Again, I think that's all situational. I think that comes down to situational awareness of like when are people utilizing cleanses. So I think as people start to become more comfortable with the class and taking into account what I had said earlier about like utilizing cleanse field is like a more stationary thing. Like I see a lot of people who will drop cleanse fields as we're moving, and then they don't necessarily get the value out of utilizing a cleanse field, right? So understanding it's more of a static ability when you've stopped moving, or there's like an area where you feel like a lot of people are going to be standing for a while, right? So maybe you dodge out, but if there are a bunch of people that are still standing there, you're still going to get the value out of it. But it's understanding those situations, understanding when to be using Purge Gyro on pushes and when you feel like you can't support. Also, especially with these two, using them, wouldn't say off cooldown, but using them pretty often. One thing I do want to stress, though, which it's actually very good that you bring this up, I don't think most of the time it's good to overlap your Purge Gyro and your Cleanse Field itself. I think they are both playing the same job, which is to clear like ambient condies. So if you have like 1 or 2 or even 3 condies on your bar that aren't like drastically detrimental, so something like Immobilize, something like Chill, like if those aren't necessarily on your bar, you don't need to necessarily be looking to like fumigate the person because they have 5 condies. You can also just have your Purge Gyro ticking and it will get rid of those 5 condies. But since they're both ambient condi cleanses, trying to get rid of it over time, there's nothing no panic, nothing really like going on. I think it comes down less to cleanse amount because, to be quite frank, I don't think the amount really matters. I think what actually matters is how they're using it. I think Moth put a message in the channel a while back, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. I'd rather have a scrapper who cleanses one emobe off me than 5 random condies like Torment, Poison, Bleed, Burn, even Slow. Like, I would much rather the scrapper be clearing that one condi rather than the 5 condies, because I believe that's much more important. I hope that answers your question.
He said yes, that helped. Thanks.
Okay, cool, thank you. So with that, I'll move very quickly onto what I believe ideal scrapper positioning is, especially for an intermediate level. I think the answer is going to be when Rawl is moving and pushing forward, it is ideal to be as close to him as you can be. But once we've stopped moving, and I think this is the very interesting thing, I'm going to look at all these red dots in front of me as the enemy group, and I'm going to look at Moth as my commander. I'm putting the target on his head just so you can see it. Ideally, you want to be standing about 300 range behind Rawl, or behind whoever the tag is. You don't necessarily need to be standing, and I guess this is a little tight because this is a little too close, in my opinion, but it is something that allows you to put your cleanse field down and still cleanse Rawl and cleanse the people who are in the front with things like Purge Gyro, with things like Cleanse Field, especially with Fumigate because it's 600 range, or Med Blaster, which is also 600 range. But it doesn't have you standing in all the damage, right? You as a whole have 2 skills that actually heal yourself, right? So your F1 heals yourself and your 4 heals yourself. Obviously, you have like a little bit of healing when it comes to like Soothing Detonation, when it comes to like Super Elixir. But again, I would think about it more as like if you could stand in less damage, that would be ideal, because you could always be supporting the people who are in front of you with healing. If you are standing in the damage, it is a lot harder to be healing those people. Also, if I could I get like 3 or 4 people to stand on top of Moth who are on blue team for a second? Yeah. Yeah, Digi, you can stand there, that's fine. Yeah. Perfect. Just, yeah, come on. Oh, okay. Never mind, doesn't matter. So, if I'm looking at Moth here, right, like, even while he's taking damage, I'm taking no damage here, and I'm still able to support him from this distance, right? So, regardless of what's happening, I'm taking no external pressure, and, like, I see a couple, like, Condi's, like, weakness and bleeding on him, so maybe I'm gonna start going through my ambient Condi cleanses. Maybe if the damage starts being too high, I'll drop Super Elixir on their feet, right? And, oh, wow, his health is getting really low. Let me try and hit him with Bandage Blast. Let me hit him with a 4, etc., etc. Could drop my Cleanse Field into Burst to get a nice burst of healing, etc. But the second I see that Emobe go on his bar, I'm thinking Fumigate. That is always going to be my first thought. Because you want to get rid of that as quickly as possible. Dodging is arguably the most broken mechanic in the entirety of the game. Like, for basically a full second and a huge amount of movement, people can't hurt you at all. So allowing players to dodge is extremely valuable, which is also one of the reasons why Infusion Bomb is so good, because it gives vigor, which means you get more dodges off. So, does anyone have any questions about, like, what I would deem ideal scrapper positioning?
I would say I don't have a question about that. There was another question that came up, and it's a little, it's not about positioning, but it's about Super Elixir. Someone wanted to demo the projectile aspect of it because I guess they're unfamiliar with it being a projectile, and they would like to see it demoed to show that it is a projectile.
Could one of the scrappers on the red team come up to me and use... Sorry, could I have another one? Because that was a little early and mine's on cooldown, sorry. Just any defense field will work. Ow. Defense field? Oh, sick. So as you can see, it gets eaten right there, and there's nothing on the ground anywhere. If you ended up seeing my stream. Oh, that would have also worked perfectly. I'm so sorry, I don't have it up right now, but it is technically a projectile, and will get eaten by any form of projectile block.
I mean, we saw it in your stream. It was eaten up by the defense fields. It didn't go down.
By the way, also funny note: if you throw it into a projectile reflect, it will also land and it will heal the enemies. So, also something to keep in mind, which is why I mean, be a little careful. It's not a huge deal, but just something to think about. So, with that in mind, does anyone have any questions before I move on to the advanced topics? I'll take silence as a no. So I'll move on to the last three topics. I'll try and do them really quick because some of them are just honestly settings that I think are super, super valuable and super important to playing Scrapper. One of which is free camera, one of which is how to utilize about face to get into that ideal Scrapper positioning I was talking about earlier. And what your like ideal camera position would be as well with free camera. And so I'll talk about those two first, and then I'll move on to what is peeling, but I'll probably talk about that while I show my own footage. So, free camera. As I've shown in this stream quite a bit, very useful tool. I can be running forward in a direction while also still looking at people. Like, I can keep an eye on Moth this whole time while just moving back and forth in a straight line, which is very, very important. And even if Moth is the tag, if we're moving forward, Moth doesn't want to move forward right now, but that's fine. But if we're moving forward, I can keep an eye on people that are around me, like even the enemy group. Like if this group is the enemy group right here, I can keep an eye on that enemy group with free camera while still keeping my character moving in a certain direction, which I think is extremely valuable, especially on something like Scrapper, where seeing what the enemy is going to be doing is so important, not only for yourself, but for just what you think you're going to need to do for the whole enemy or for the whole allied group based on what the enemy is going to be doing. So yeah, free camera, very important. I'll show some examples of what I think is ideal camera positioning when I show my footage. Again, my footage is not law. It's definitely not perfect by any means. But maybe I can show you some examples of at least how I'm playing and what I think ideal, like some instances where I have ideal camera positioning, what that would look like while utilizing free camera and about face. Ooh, something I also wanted to talk about was when I was talking about that ideal Scrapper positioning, if you're watching my stream right now, to get to that ideal Scrapper positioning by using S key, it actually takes a pretty considerable amount of time just going backwards. But when utilizing about face, you could get there in almost half the time, if not half the time itself. So just as a general tip, I think about face is a very useful tool, especially for a class like Scrapper. Um, so I highly suggest learning it, working on it. Once you get to that advanced level, as I talked about, you feel like you know how to utilize your cleanses. You're not necessarily rotating your cleanses. You're more using them in a reactionary sense, right? So utilizing them in like the situations I talked about, rather than just saying, okay, it's been X amount of time. It's time for me to use a cleanse. It is, why am I using this cleanse? Once you feel like you're past that point and you're putting yourself in pretty good positions to not take damage and moving with raw, that's when I would really start working on like about facing, utilizing free camera to make sure you could constantly see the tail and see what's going on and what's happening. And then eventually peeling. So before I show my footage, I will give a quick definition of what peeling is. Peeling is basically the act of saving someone who may be either mispositioned or in dire straits, most of the time away from tag. So if Weasel was in a bad situation and Moth is my tag, right? Peeling would be the act of going up and supporting him because he needs support, and you can see your tag is perfectly fine. And trying to do everything in your power to get that person back to tag. A lot of times you end up seeing people, once you start to get better, they might go up for a med kit too to try to get as much healing into the person as possible. But again, it comes down to understanding what the player needs as a whole. Sometimes this comes down to even looking at their bar to see what condies they have on that bar to see if it's worth it to condi cleanse them or just heal them. Now, again, especially when you're first trying to get this concept down, don't necessarily need to be thinking about like staring at their bar, because that could be very distracting. But even something like me looking at Weasel and seeing he's not moving and understanding, okay, he might be a mob here because he's not moving. I should fumigate for him. Is a very valuable thing when it comes to peeling. Again, this is a more advanced topic. Once you feel like we've gotten everything else down, we can you could work on that. And I will say, there are definitely more topics to talk about that are more advanced, even past that. If anyone feels like the things that I talk about today, or I conclude talking about, you feel like you've mastered all of those things and you're very comfortable with, I would highly, highly recommend the next step being footage review. I am always happy to footage review for anyone who would like to get better at Scrapper. Assuming we're not facing you on the daily in GVGs in RV, I would be I would be happy to talk about Scrapper, help out in any way that I can, and give advice, especially when it comes to more advanced topics. I would say things like starting to look at like Condi bars and what's happening, peeling for people, as well as even I lost my train. Single target supporting. So something I had just done here, right? Even something as simple as getting the click on that person that needs support in the thick of it is very, very difficult. And something you definitely shouldn't think about until you're feeling much, much more confident in your actual like gameplay itself. Like once this all feels like muscle memory, like understanding the situation and immediately knowing what to do, like single target support is a difficult thing to um, do. Okay, so with that, I will stop sharing my screen on Guild Wars, and I'll start sharing my screen on um, my own personal footage, so other people can see that.
Can I ask a quick question about the free camera?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, so it's under the field of view under the options, right? Where it says camera.
Hmm.
Now I have enable camera, teleportation, and adjust camera to character height. Do I uncheck those and just use free camera, or do I check any other boxes besides free camera?
You can check whatever you're most comfortable with. Personally, I actually, unless you're a very tall character, I actually wouldn't have adjust camera to character height. If you have a really short camera, it'll actually make your field of view a little smaller.
Okay.
Just as a little bit of advice. But yeah, you could have free camera checked with anything else, and it should still work the same exact way.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I also have a question about free camera because I've been told to try it, but I don't notice anything different between like normal camera and free camera, but maybe I'm just like using it wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit more about free
With your
camera.
left click, I think. So when you move the
Yeah.
camera and you move, and then you press WSD, it won't realign it back to behind you.
Yep.
Whatever.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Is it like
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
technically,
you're
when you're pressing WSD, your like camera's like locking back behind you. Free
yeah,
camera allows you
without
to like
Oh,
the
do you
same
It'll like
mean-
camera.
auto adjust if you don't hold right click. It'll auto adjust to like
Yeah,
So
okay?
you can set it with left click and your camera will stay there no matter what you do with your.
so you can just look left forever without holding any buttons.
Yeah.
For example.
real quick,
Right
just to
click
throw it
is
out there, if you are holding right click and you're trying to hold left click at the same time, nothing will happen because you'll just be moving your character forward in that direction that you need. It is solely left click. So if you were to press left click and move your camera around and hold W, you'll see that that's when it'll actually happen. Similar with the about face itself. I was showing on screen, but I was able to about face and my camera would face the exact same direction. Um, that is done by holding left click and then pressing the about face button and moving forward with W. I think there are a bunch of about face tutorials on YouTube as well if you want to practice that a little bit as well.
About face it.
Yeah, I still don't get it. Does it also work with right click or is it just left click?
It is just left click. So make
Okay,
sure
yeah.
that Yeah, make sure you don't have right click clicked and you just have left click clicked.
Oh, that
And
sucks.
Yeah,
yeah,
you gotta
so
left click. You gotta left click to like get your camera unlocked from your character, and then you about face, and then you right click to like go back forward.
yeah, so it forces you to hold W instead of holding both left and right click at the same time. If that's something that if you're more comfortable with, which is why I say again, just something to work on. Like I would go to like either here Edge of the Mist or I would go to Armistice Bastion and I would just like move around while working on my free camera for like the time it would take me to get onto a map. So like before I'm even on the map, like waiting in queue, I'll just like run around and practice about face and like free camera. Yeah, just some things of advice for me real quick. But I did want to get to my footage before I ran out of time. So it's a lot of footage. I'm definitely not going to go through all of it. Just want to show you some key things that I was talking about earlier. I would also be happy to talk with anyone else offline, like after the raid that is going to happen in like 5 minutes, or even just anywhere else. Feel free to DM me. Um, I'm happy to talk to people. So, if no one else has any other questions, I will move on to my footage. Something I also did want to note, I am a big fan of squad view. Once you feel like you're um, more comfortable with like understanding the flow of the fight and what condies are going to be on people without looking at your at party view, I highly recommend squad view just so that you can see the health of everyone else. Um, so that you can keep in mind like who needs peeling, who needs support when. Um, Same thing with thick squad health bars. I recommend thick squad health bars instead of thick party health bars, just so you could see everyone. Like uh, Moth is in my party, so I would be able to see him even with thick party health bars, but like Shame, I wouldn't be able to see that health bar. It would be like much, much thinner and much smaller. So like I can see individual people a little bit better. Again, this is just my personal opinion. So super speeding that person back to raw, kind of whatever, could have used it a little better. Might have been able to hold it. Just kind of nothing is happening right now. Okay, so ideally here, we hear like we're all calling that he wants to be moving forward. If I had my F1 up right now, which ideally I would definitely want to be pressing my F1 now. And as we start getting into range, you can see that I use defense field so that once this push happens and we go into them, we're going to have stability for that first push. I F1 now, a little late. I pop Bird Gyro because again, we're moving forward and I'm looking to clear ambient condies from these people who are behind. I think this is an example of what I was talking about with like free camera. I'm technically still moving forward here, but I turn my camera to the side. I'm able to get the click on this person and I'm able to support them from range, even though I'm still moving this direction. I drop Cleanse Field here because I see that there are still a bunch of people who are going to be standing here because they're cleaving on the down state, so I kind of assume people are going to be standing here. Should probably be moving with Rawl, but was just my thought. Also threw the infusion bomb down while we were over here. Definitely could have held the vital burst. I didn't need to use that at all there. But I still think like cleanse field, infusion bomb, fine. I'm getting enough ticks out of it and I'm supporting people. I stealth and I end up trying to get this person into stealth because the group is pushing on them. And I don't really want to fumigate because I would get me out of stealth and then I would get absolutely destroyed here. It's really the only reason I'm not using fumigate. But I am still trying to get the healing on this person. As you can see, I'm desperately going for it. So I think this is an example of like might not be the best peeling, but this is kind of like peeling. I see this person in the back. I drop a function gyro on them because again, like I had mentioned earlier, this can help hand res people who are in downstate. I end up moving a little far away from tag here to try to get the support on this person individually, which I don't think causes us to die here specifically. We had 3 other scrappers over there, so I'm not, or 4 other scrappers over there. So I'm not necessarily concerned with group support, but either way. I run up, drop a cleanse field. I was trying to get a little greedy with the medkit 2. Something I didn't mention that I definitely should have mentioned is that medkit 2 can also heal people who are in downstate. So if I were to hit a medkit 2 on this person, when they're in downstate, it will bring their actual downstate health itself up higher. But yeah, I should be looking for a fumigate because they're caught in the bubble. It's a little slow on the fumigate, in my opinion, for myself. Definitely should have used it a second or two earlier. But I think that's a good time to use it. People are caught inside of the bubble itself. Fumigating for those people who are caught in the bubble is always ideal. And I think the fight's just over. So something I do want to talk about is like my camera positioning here. Like I am moving backwards, but I still have the enemy group in sight. I have our whole group in sight, and I have Rawl in sight, which allows me to kind of like understand the flow of the fight and like what's going to happen. I think this S keying is really bad. I need to be over here much quicker because they're about to spike on people. So a little late on the movement, but I think this is fine. Yeah, I still don't have Fumigate up, which is really sad because I would have liked to Fumigate these people because they're definitely not moving. Fumigate a little late because the cooldown wasn't up yet. Yeah, I think it's kind of over at this point. I dropped the Cleanse Field to try to support these people who are moving around. I dropped Purge because we just desperately need to, like, recover as quickly as we can. Could have definitely pressed that defense field. I guess not that much earlier. A little bit earlier. This fight, I think this is Indo, right? Yeah, this is Indo. So again, keeping an eye on the tail, keeping Rawl in my field of view while also seeing Indo's whole group is ideal. Even like this camera angle here, I think is really good. It's the idea of what your camera angle should be is you want to try and keep as much of the tail in field of view. You want to keep your commander in the field of view, and you want to keep the enemy in the field of view as best as you can. When this disenchantment comes up, so I look to fumigate for these people. Stealth gyroing, trying to support this person, but it's a little difficult with the push coming, so I had to dodge. I F1 because we're looking to push forward. Purge gyro, again, don't really have the time to be helping people. I'm trying to F1 and move with Rawl himself, so I pop Purge gyro. I'm looking at Rawl here. Probably could be peeling for these people because Rawl himself was fine with other scrappers standing on him. So like here would have been a really good example of like either looking to fumigate for these people, drop like a function gyro on them, even just simply throwing heals into them with medkit 1. Like you can see I'm hitting this person for medkit 1 heals, like even at this range in SMC, like it's very far ranging. Could throw an elixir, a super elixir at people that are at least this far away because I'm not going to be able to reach them. And I could be wrong, but I think super elixir is 900 range. I'd have to double check that, but it's still a pretty far range. But like as you can see, I'm kind of standing like a little bit behind Rawl, but still close enough to be able to like support him and give him heals. I see some people who are in front who aren't moving. These people up here, so I look to fumigate. But as Callie actually talked about earlier, since there were some people in my party who were in front of me, I actually think they get some of the cleanse, and some of the people up here don't. Might be a little better to move off to the side a little bit if I was looking to get these exact people inside of it. And then I drop a super elixir here because people are getting spiked now. Vital burst. People are low. Heal people who are low. Could have been used a little earlier, I think, but. And I think this little clip here is like the best example of when about face is super valuable. Like I'm about facing out here, and there are some people who aren't necessarily about facing. and it's going to be much harder to like S key away from the bomb that's being thrown at us here, as it is going to be the about face running away from them. Try fumigate for them. Have them in my line of sight. I'm still able to dodge and get out of it. Turn around as quickly as I can to look for the tail itself to try to give as much healing as I possibly can at this point, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to save anyone individually. Again, we were staying still, drop Cleanse Field, now we're moving, I drop Purge Gyro. Might be a little overlap between the two. I definitely I could have held the Purge Gyro for like at least an extra like second or two. Again, this is all very nitpicky stuff now, I would say, but people stop moving, I fumigate. Try to get some healing out, and it looks like we lost this from here. I know that raid is starting like now, so I don't want to take any more time. I'll probably send Rawl that footage itself, and if anyone wants to see it or look at it at any point, you just message him and ask. But with that, I will conclude the Scrapper training and review. Thank you all for showing up and listening to me ramble for an hour and 15 minutes about Scrapper. If anyone ever has any questions or wants to know more about Scrapper, please feel free to reach out to me.